always a start on time, especially when we're talking about things like new faculty orientation. So I'm Denise Stockley. I'm the president of the Society for Teaching and Learning in Higher Education, and welcome to our Emerging Strategy session. And I'll turn the floor to Erika Kustra.
Hi everyone, I'm Erika Kustra. I'm the director of the Center at the University of Windsor, and I'm also the chair of the Educational Developers Caucus, and so it's a real pleasure to be bringing these webinars and having these discussions as they're incredibly useful. And I'm going to turn it over to Bev Hamilton.
Hi, I'm Bev Hamilton. I am Erika Kustra's partner in crime on new faculty orientation at the University of Windsor, and I'm glad to be here.
And I'll introduce myself. I'm Robin Attas. I'm an educational developer at the Center for Teaching and Learning at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. And I assist with parts of new faculty orientation along with other colleagues at Queen's. And I also run a year-long new faculty orientation program through the center that's focused exclusively on teaching. And I also have been, for the last, well, since I began as an ed developer, actually 2 years ago, have been doing land acknowledgements. And now that we are living in these remote distance times, I'm finding it really actually beneficial to keep doing land acknowledgements, even though I know that I'm not in the same place and space as all the people that I'm talking to. And I think so the territory that I currently am on is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. That's the kind of generic acknowledgement that Queen's often makes, but I know that my house also rests on those territories. But I find it really interesting because I'm standing in my house to think about having to unpack and explore what it means to make a land acknowledgement in the place where I considered my home. And I think that I would encourage everyone to kind of take a step back and say, well, what is the land that my house rests on, or the place that I live? The place where you sleep, the place where you cook your meals, whose land is that? And what's the history of that place? And what's your role in building that place? I think, if there's some benefits that are coming out of this strange time. And I think one for me has been having to rethink what a land acknowledgement means and to make it really matter in terms of my own personal circumstances. So Carolyn, I think we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So I'm Carolyn Hosler. I'm the EDC's Vice Chair of Communications and your tech flight attendant today, coming in from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, which is on Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of Métis. And just slightly north of where I am is a traditional hunting ground called Wanuskewin. And they've had the first bison calf born on that land in 150 years. So they brought back some bison calf last year. And so one of the things that's happening here is we have spring of crocuses and recognizing that this is very much traditional land here. So in terms of what we wanted to talk about today is I wanted to show you the opening poll. So if you haven't had a chance yet, please complete it. Denise has wonderfully been posting that again and again in the chat, because as new people join, they only see what they join in the chat, what's shown as soon as they arrive. So that's why you'll see it if you've been here a while. What you'll notice in here is that you'll have a couple of chances to hear different people speak. In your Zoom, if you're on an iPad, it's in your right corner. If you're on a computer, it's in your left corner, is a chance to look at gallery view. This will allow you to see the images of all the people who are signed in on video, so that would be a chance to see more people. In addition to that, you'll be able to see the screens, and you're also going to get a chance in a moment to go into a Google Doc. In the Google Doc, you'll have two screens open, and if that's one of those things that flips around on your computer, what you can do is hit escape or minimize the Zoom screen, so it's just one of the screens on your, one of the windows on your screen. So when you go to open the Google Docs, which we'll be doing shortly, you'll be able to move over there. I'm gonna go, if you can go into the poll, we have 18 responses and 49 people in here. So please go in and complete the poll, and I'll be showing kind of the results as they come in. One of the other things you'll note is that we're asking people to keep their microphones off, and that allows for any background noise to be reduced when our speakers. But if you would like to make a comment, please put in the chat. You also will be having the opportunity for the Google Doc, and Robin will be telling you more about that. So I'm going to just switch from showing you our opening slide to showing you our poll. So we'll go there now. So these are the results of our poll that are coming in. You'll see the number kind of increasing at the top. And when we look at where people are coming in from, we have all the way from the coast of Newfoundland and Labrador all the way to the coast of British Columbia. So we do have individuals from across the country joining us in. And then what is our role? So our role here is including deans, department leaders, educators, faculties, and instructors. We have teaching center leaders, and this will jump as new people join. We have educational developers, admin assistants to executive directors, institutional academic planning, and academic support. So we do have individuals coming in from quite a few different roles. In terms of the current status on the campus, we have encouraged but not required to work campus buildings access restricted and the access closed. So about half of the places have access closed. We have one place that was restricted but now closed due to flooding. I know out in Alberta there is, and I don't know if other places as well are experiencing actually springtime floods in addition to COVID and other issues right now. We have, as a status, everyone seems to be going online for spring and summer. In terms of fall classes, we're no longer 100% discussion. We're now 82% discussion, with some moving some online, 8% looking for all online, some people not certain, and officially in discussion, but planning is taking place. In terms of what is the, and then the last two ones, I'm going to hand it over to Robin. So.
All right. So we did, I mean, a lot of those poll questions are broad and help us, I think, as a group understand where people are coming from, both geographically, but also in terms of their campus situation and the kind of climate that's going on. But we did want to ask a couple of questions about new faculty orientation specifically, since that's the topic of this Emerging Strategies webinar. So the first question was around what is the status of fall new faculty orientations on your campus? And I know, at least from my personal perspective, I've had some initial discussions with others at my institution about, well, what are we going to do and how's this going to work? But no confirmation yet. And it looks like most 63.9% at least of responses are also still unsure, although there's definitely a good chunk of that pie that's moving some or all online. So I think maybe there's an emerging sense that that's the direction we're heading. And I think that, you know, as institutions start to release their plans for fall, that also will be shaping the kinds of responses in terms of new faculty orientations as well. And then the last question, just asking for participants' involvement with new faculty orientation. It looks like the majority of folks are involved in coordinating the program in some way. And then smaller groups of people, 16.2%, 13.5%, that are either somewhat involved, but they're not sure, and then folks who are not involved, but are here gaining and gathering information. So. Again, I think that gives us a pretty clear sense that many of us are quite heavily invested in this topic today. Anything else poll-wise that you want to talk about, Carolyn?
Nope, we can continue.
Okay, great. So I think now if we'll turn over to the Google Doc, and I really love the team effort here that you can see the link to the Google Doc already popping up in your chat. As with previous webinars, we decided to use a Google Doc as a way to frame some of our discussions, as well as an opportunity to kind of collectively share ideas and capture some information that we can then make available through the keepteaching.ca website and post. So we've framed it around two questions. The first one, what are your goals in providing a new faculty orientation? And then the second one, possible strategies for remote delivery of typical components. So I think we'll start with the goals question. I think that in reading through the literature again, a lot of the kind of best practices in terms of actually designing a new faculty orientation program are, not surprisingly, that you come up with some really clear goals. I mean, as educational developers, at least I know for myself, I'm constantly telling instructors, you know, what are your learning outcomes? What are your goals in this course? What are your goals in this lesson? So it would make very much good sense to have some clear goals or outcomes that are that a new faculty orientation program should achieve, or aspirationally would be great to achieve. So for me personally, I think having, before I was an educational developer, I was a faculty member myself. And I think coming in as a new faculty member, one of the most important things for me to have happen as part of a new faculty orientation was actually just to meet people, to feel like there were other people on campus who were in a similar situation to me, to get to know other people, even superficially, who are kind of at the same career stage. So I think for me, now that I'm organizing these things, for me, one of the biggest goals I see is to build community and connections among new faculty, and to make sure that those connections go interdisciplinary, interfaculty, moving across all sorts of boundaries and buckets that people often stick themselves in. Another goal that I put up there was to think about campus resources specifically, but really to see that as sort of an overview. My goal with an initial new faculty orientation is usually giving faculty enough of a familiarity with what's out there that they would know who to ask if they had a question. So not knowing all the ins and outs and nitty gritty of each subunit within a particular organizational structure, but more just, oh, I'm having trouble with the LMS system, I would go to these people, that sort of thing. Bev and Erika, what kinds of goals do you see in your orientations?
I'm going to suggest Bev, would you like to go first? Bev is from the Office of the Provost, and at the University of Windsor, our new faculty orientation is both teaching, research, and services. And so while I contribute a part, Bev provides the massive oversight and makes sure we have representation of all of those different components of the faculty. Bev, are there things you wanted to add in?
Well, sure. I think we've been doing this for about 4 or 5 years together, Erika and I, and every year I think we peel back the amount of content further and say, that's too much information. That for us, I think it comes more and more down to a few core things. And I think what has already been talked about in terms of this sense of meeting other people is a big piece of that, feeling like you belong on campus and that you're not some sort of fake who just showed up by accident. I think for lots of people, kids, I'm old. For lots of new faculty, there's, a question of imposter syndrome is a piece of what they bring to the table, even if they don't want to admit it. Then I think another piece of it is around, what can you do to help people feel like they have agency in the situation, that the whole promotion and tenure process isn't something that's going to roll over them, but that they have agency about making decisions. And what are the decisions they want to make now in the short term in terms of their goals, and getting a little bit of a perspective on what do they want to think about in the long term. Because lots of faculty, I find in this, they come in with this idea that I just have to get through these hurdles. And we try to give them a little sense that there's the hurdles and those are really important, but also bigger picture, where do you want to end up at the other end of those hurdles? Who do you want to be, and what kind of faculty member are you trying to become? Another piece of this really, and I think you've already spoken to it, is this idea, not so much that you know every single detail of how to do things on campus, but that the campus has your back and will help you. And who do you call if you need help? And then finally, there's a question of networks. I think in this particular, we're struggling a little bit with this ourselves in terms of how to make this work this year, because a lot of those pieces are sort of hard to imagine online. I think we're going to have to think about longer timelines in terms of faculty orientation this year, the kinds of things we do year round in terms of mentorship circles and stuff like that. I think starting that earlier might be a good plan. We've been thinking about the layers of communications and connections we can help them build more explicitly than they normally would have to. So we're reaching out to the heads to talk about what's going to be different this year. We're looking at mid-career faculty and how can they be engaged. We're looking at peer mentors we can start early. So those are big pieces of how we're working on it. And another piece of it for us is that we've been thinking about how to systematically engage faculty with the various virtual environments they're going to have to work in the next little while. Normally, we kind of move them, it's a bit of a movable feast, so we move them from space to space so they get a bit sort of a sense of what campus is like. But this year, we're thinking about the same things in terms of things like the Blackboard environment, Teams environment, all the different pieces that they might have to feel like they're comfortable with. So that's explicitly a part of what we're doing. And I'm still thinking about the social piece, so I'm going to leave that one for now. Erika, does that sound about right?
Yeah, and one of the things I wanted to mention is that these goals that are coming out, and I see the themes coming out in the Google Doc, which is amazing. the goals of networking, reflective practice, those are all consistent with the literature. Foundational, if you haven't read it, BOICE, B-O-I-C-E is foundational, really old. We started doing new faculty orientations for me about a little over 20 years ago at McMaster, and he was foundational in the way we thought about it. And the new literature is reinforcing it. Catherine Sutherland from New Zealand has done some cross-country studies on the success of new faculty. And repeatedly, networking, having a good network is one of the best predictors of whether your new faculty can hit the road running and succeed over their first year of tenure. And then they also, what I was surprised by the research, but reinforced by, was that those faculty who developed their teaching and spent time developing their teaching, professionally developing their teaching, had a much greater success in their research as well. And there's all possible reasons why that might be true, but that was very helpful and useful in the orientation and development and the working with new faculty and their heads and deans to have that piece of research available. So that was by Catherine Sutherland from New Zealand. So thanks. And I'll turn it back now to Robin.
Yeah, so I'm just reading through the Google Doc looking for some themes, and I think I see the word introduce and introducing over and over and over, because I think there's that recognition. I'm even looking at Mel Young's comment that orientation is often overwhelming and needs to be broken into different pieces. So I think it does seem like there's this emerging sense amongst the things that I'm seeing posted that at least, you know, that initial August or September orientation is really the first step. And then, you know, you build from there. So maybe as we're thinking about shifting, what are the pieces that faculty need to know, or that instructors need to know right off the get-go? What can wait? And that becomes, you know, it's the same kind of conversation that we might have every year, but now in this year, maybe even more so. What are the must-knows? What are the need-to-knows? What are the nice-to-knows? And how do we scatter those over the whole year? It seems to be an emerging topic for sure. It looks like there's a lot of sense of community, introducing culture, and that sort of thing. Welcome, so that sense of belonging that Erika alluded to is certainly emerging as well. I think there's also an interesting discussion or mention, at least, of different types of instructors or faculty. So are these full-time tenure track faculty that we're welcoming? Well, they might also be contract faculty. They might be sessional instructors. They might be, are they domestic? Are they international? Where are those folks coming from? And I know I've had conversations at my institution about how we're even getting the international faculty to come this year. But I think that is certainly part of the mix, is who's in the room and what kinds of supports do they need given where they're coming from and the kinds of identities that they have. Erika, Bev, are you noticing any other themes?
No, I think we could move on to take these goals and then move them into the strategies, and you'll see that Robin created a set of ABCs, the kinds of things that are often in new faculty, so feel welcome to add under there. But if there's some component that you don't see there, create your own, your next level and add those in as well. And do feel welcome to start adding in those details. And we'll just give a few insights, and Robin, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, so I mean, and that's really a good advice, Erika, that these are, you know, typical common things for new faculty orientations, but if there's something that you often see or that you would like to do this year that's not listed, please do add it. So a couple of, I mean, you'll see that there's a number of different possibilities. Two things, and I'll confess right off the bat that my head has been in other places lately, and so these are sort of off the cuff thoughts on my part, but I've been thinking a little bit about networking and socializing and how that might work remotely, thinking about online communities of practice, thinking about maybe small online groups and asking people to connect on their own, and then maybe moving that into a bigger space. I like some of the comments emerging about mentorship as well, so maybe thinking about mentorship circles in an online format. I think it would be helpful. The other one that I was thinking through was about institutional culture and climate. So when I do a face-to-face orientation last year, I actually showed the participants a quick 1 or 2 minute promo video that the marketing department at Queen's had put together, and then gave them kind of an annotated rundown of, yes, these are the stereotypes of my institution, but you'll also notice that 3/4 of the video was football games, and that's not really the sense of campus climate that you'll get on the day-to-day unless you are the football coach. So kind of, I think, building on existing marketing videos to help talk about institutional culture, but then offering that alternative to help, again, with that sense of belonging, the sense of inclusion, the sense that you don't have to like football to come to Queen's, thankfully.
Thanks. And Bev, do you want to add a few things in? Someone's mentioned in the document that Google Doc has stuck. I think it might have just paused and people are adding more to it. So maybe if it's stuck, try again. It seems to be adding again. And then I'll turn it over to Bev.
Can you hear me right now? I'm a bit confused. I think so, right? Okay. There's a few things I want to think about just in terms of this year. I've been thinking a lot about the level of anxiety and isolation that new faculty may be bringing to their campuses this year in particular. Lots of our new faculty come by themselves, or they're coming by themselves and their families joining them later, or they're coming by themselves, period. And, you know, to come to a new city and not have the physical opportunity to bump into people the way you normally would, this is a very different situation for them. And because everything is so different this year anyways, the level of anxiety that's always a part of new faculty orientation, I think, is going to be much higher. And that's part of the reason that we're thinking about starting pretty early with this process. So I'm in the process now of getting a list of anyone who has already been appointed, so we can start talking to them now about how they're doing, what their plan is, when they plan to arrive, what their situation is. Because we have people who like literally have, you know, they're coming here with kids. They don't know what the situation is with the schools. They're not sure what's happening with their houses. So it's not just the academic scholarly piece of this year. I think to a much greater extent, we're going to have to reach out on a more holistic basis to make sure our new faculty are coming in a reasonable way. So that's a piece of it. In terms of the online piece of this too, I think there's some sort of fundamental principles around the way online learning operates. It's not possible to do the kind of, you know, 5.5 hour day that we often think of with early career, with new faculty orientation. So I think we're going to have to spread things out quite a bit. Typically, when people online aren't sure or uncomfortable, they just go quiet. And when you're in a room face to face, you can see that. But when you're online, it is not that obvious. People turn off their video and they just stop being there. So that whole process of figuring out how to manage the outreach to people on maybe multiple channels could be really important. I'm hoping to have a cohort of people who went through new faculty orientation in the last couple of years be part of this as a sort of a side channel conversation. So I guess those are kind of my pieces. Having worked online a bit, I can say that, you know, these conversations have a lot of layers for people, and those get lost when we're not working face to face. So there's things you do that are kind of informal, things you do that are formal, things that are really structured, the story you tell off the cuff, all those are kind of a piece of it. And some of that can be kind of filtered out when we're online. So really thinking about who's going to be having those kinds of different sorts of conversations, I think is important as a part of thinking about this.
And I think I mentioned on the EDC listserv, one of the things we're playing with, although we have some possibilities, we're just not sure yet if we have the time to do it, for the ideas of the campus networking and the socializing our faculty with our campus services. We're playing with a virtual campus network event or campus fair, where there's an image and the campus services name, and you can click it and go in and get a one-page summary of their contacts, a couple of the hot points they wish new faculty knew, plus maybe some additional resources they want to make available, like a booth or a table would be if you went around, and then an option to click a button and have a chat with someone during the hour and a half that we have the service fair up. And then, of course, the service fair would remain available, but the chats would not happen anymore, maybe asynchronously, they could leave a comment. So that's what we're hoping for. We're working with a really wonderful young man who is going to help us try to do that if there's enough time. But that's one of the ways we're trying to use technology to recreate, not all, but some of the experiences that we're looking at normally face-to-face. And then another thing we do, which our faculty have loved, is a short 2-minute research talk. And really they get one slide, and Bev organized this as a suggestion from our research office. And they get one slide, they send it in advance, and they stand up and they just give a brief introduction of who they are and really the most important focus of their research. And then it's really phenomenal. They all have conversations, they see connections, network, possible joint research has come out of those conversations. And so we're playing with how that might go online. One possibility might be to videotape and post. Another possibility might be to give people the option of pre-videotaping or synchronously having their little video talk, and then a break and a discussion held through our virtual networking. So there are lots of different possibilities. We're going back to our goal and then trying to figure out how would this translate online, and is it what's the most important thing that needs to happen now, and then some later face-to-face things that will happen once we're allowed to meet back together again. Normally our provost has a welcome, and their deans and heads come to that, as well as them and their spouses. We try to have a series of events that spouses are welcome to as well. And those things are harder to create for us online, so we may have to wait. We have in the morning more required sessions, and then in the afternoon more optional, so they can pop in and out, choose the things that are of most interest. We have things like our LMS training on our finance system. Some of them will know that, some of them won't, and they can choose if they want to take it. And then we have things like campus tours, but we live in Windsor, we live right across from Detroit. So we offer a foot tour where we tour around on Detroit and then go visit and have a drink. And then we have just created last year something similar in Windsor in our city. So people get a chance to walk around and see the city, usually in a group of 5 to 10. So it's a small and nice way of connecting. And I don't quite know how to do that online. We talked about virtual tours. We haven't decided yet whether that's something we're going to try to recreate or just wait and reintroduce later in person. And that's that idea of some blended, some in person, some synchronous, some asynchronous. And I will also share, we post our resources at the year so that they're available online, the handbook and things and the slides. And what I'll do is I'll go in and post those, the link to those. So if you want to see the handbook and the slides we've had from past new faculty, I'll pop them in. And I also
in the Google Docs.
Oh, it's in the Google Docs? Great.
The link for that is in the Google Docs already.
Thank you, Bev. And what I wanted to do too is give you a chance. There's sort of 3 ways you can start adding in now. Keep adding in the Google Doc, but also add in the chat. Some people are adding some specific comments in there. But I'd also invite at this point, if you want to use your microphone and jump in, do feel welcome. And so you can use it at that point. And when you're finished, just mute again, just to keep the interference low. So, and I'll turn it back to Robin and anyone else who'd like to jump in.
Given Erika's invitation, maybe I'll sit in awkward silence for a bit to see if somebody wants to jump in.
And I know we've had lots of people running new faculty orientations for many years and running them in different ways. So do feel welcome however you'd like to do it.
One thing, this is Geneviève from York University. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. So one thing that we do every summer that's somewhat successful is putting our faculty in touch with the student experience by telling them about the demographics of our students, and also we have a video testimonials from some students who talk about their experience at York and why they love it here. Faculty always love that 10-minute video, and so for this year, instead of having the faculty panel that we usually do live, face-to-face, we might decide to have those faculty members prepare a 5-minute video about their experience at York. And we typically pick recently hired faculty, so who have been at York for 1 or 2 years, and so they share their insights, having been in their shoes not too long ago. So we find that those two things are really appreciated, and there's no reason why it couldn't be done via video, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous.
Thanks so much for that. One thing that I'm noticing emerging as a trend through this is something that at least that I've been seeing a lot of with our recommendations to instructors moving to online formats, is that there's a huge push, at least from all these comments, about chunking things out, having some components available in an asynchronous or anytime format, having other things available at a specific time in synchronous format, having some things, you know, online resources, having some things where folks maybe listen to a podcast and do a walk around their town or city on their own. So having like all of these different options and having them in small doses seems like it's emerging as a trend and a thread, which is really great to see, so that we're all thinking about how can we provide this orientation in a way that doesn't overwhelm and that allows people to access it in a way that works for them. Other trends that I'm noticing, I think a lot of the familiarization with campus services and supports seems to be rooted in videos, in virtual tours, in web resources, perhaps with some live component, but it does seem like that's a place where maybe a single resource or like go-to location that lists all of the things, rather than seems like that's a possibility for with some interaction if possible, but if not possible, simply offering that map of who to go to is really critical.
One of the things I noticed, there weren't a lot of resources under starting a research, and that makes sense because most of us have a focus on the teaching. But one of the areas we did in face-to-face was roundtables, where we had a set of different topics, and then people formed roundtables, spent about half an hour together, and then rotated to another table. And this was Bev's idea. And one of the things that we had was a series of tables based on research discipline, where someone, say an associate dean of research or a highly successful researcher, and the research office's support for that faculty or discipline sat together as two co-hosts, and then people went and asked questions. And so there were tables of about 5 to 10 with two facilitators representing the research side, and that gave them a chance to ask questions in slightly smaller groups. And I think we're thinking that might be possible to duplicate in virtual with something like a Zoom or an MS Teams, a virtual meeting. So that's one possibility, and that is an idea that can be transferred to all sorts of things. It doesn't just have to be research. We've done it for things like how do you gather feedback on your teaching, a series of topics that we think some new faculty will be interested in and may be interested in a smaller group discussion, and then they rotate, and so they get to choose several of the topics offered in each round. And so that's one possibility.
Can I just add to that, Erika, that part of the strategy there was that we'd gotten feedback a couple of years in a row that, you know, some of the stuff was reaching early career who were super, super new to the academy, but we had other people who'd been teaching someplace else for 5 years. And so they thought, why are you telling me this stuff? I already know it. So the roundtable model allowed us to kind of do a little bit more differentiation, so that people who are already sort of experienced could still come and do something that was really useful for them, whereas somebody else really just wanted to know, you know, some pretty starting basics on things. So that gave us a little more room to maneuver. And also, I have to say that the absolutely 100% most popular thing is the meetings with the granting officers, the people who work in research services, who work on grant applications. It's, from my point of view, I'm not sure it is really the place to start, but it's where they want to start. And so it's great to be able to give them that opportunity.
And that's a switch, because we are research services and often wanted to give talking head presentations, and they were unfortunately one of the lower rated parts, those talking head types of events. Whereas when we switched to the round table, they shot up in our ratings.
Mhm. From a tech point of view, one of the things I was curious was anybody using their learning management systems, which I know the faculty who are teaching will have to go in to use, and instructors who are teaching are going to have to use. Is anyone using the LMS and using like small group functions of the LMS? So things like discussion boards, or in the ones that have like the ability to, like Moodle, Canvas has like the big blue, like the meeting room, like the big blue button. And are they using the kind of tech that's embedded in the LMSs for some of this gathering as well? Particularly the small group functions, not just the informational pieces.
A couple of yeses coming through the
Mm-hmm.
chat. I think it's interesting to think about for our full year teaching oriented new faculty programming, we have over the last year developed out a site in our LMS that has things, resources, RISE modules for each topic. But I haven't yet really thought about what it might look like to have that in a, and actually use it. I think mostly I've been relying on the face-to-face contacts with people and then using that as kind of a background resource. But this year I could see that it'll be flipped, that having that chat feature, having the discussion boards, having more faculty engagement with that online LMS kind of serves two purposes. One, gets them connected and oriented to new faculty life generally, but also gives them some models for what their own course might look like, and the kinds of features that they can take advantage of as they're doing their own teaching.
And the one thing that was mentioned earlier from a tech point of view, one thing we often don't always talk about with tech is this relationships and agency. So Google Docs is an example of agency where people can write in their responses, or the chat feature. So how are you not just providing information to, but co-creating with the people that are in that space as you think through? So I was just curious, is anybody doing anything where the new faculty are also kind of essentially knowledge providers and wisdom sharers? Like Bev, you mentioned the small groups where people who have similar experiences can meet up in person. So has anybody thought through some of the distance or remote options for that as well? So that might be wikis, it might be just a discussion board forum in LMS, it might be a Google Doc that they kind of co-create, depending on the tech of your university. And it could be also the mentorship circles, so not just one person mentoring a bunch of individuals, but them co-mentoring each other as well.
So Carolyn, we have started in September, what we're calling early faculty mentoring circles, or small group mentoring groups. And we are discussing starting those earlier this year and having them through the summer, so that small groups of 5, we did go up to 8 this year because we had so many on the waiting list. It's a bit large though. And there are 2 facilitators, ideally representing different career levels and different disciplines and slightly different personalities and approaches, so that they can see there's more than one right way to do this. And then they do a lot of sharing. And so it's pulling on the peer mentoring and building peer networks as well. And we've done that in person over this year, and it was very successful. So we're thinking about starting those remotely. And what we're debating right now is when we start them, because some people would like them early before their contracts start, and some people would rather wait. And so what we might do is some staggered starts, have an option or invite them to, for those who would be interested, to start a little early, and then have another later start for those who want to wait till their contract is actually started and they maybe have moved or have done whatever they would like to do.
So maybe that's just a question I put in the chat, but I can also just put it, Robin, if that's okay, just put it at the bottom of the Google Doc. And I would just ask kind of the timeline question of, you know, what are people thinking about? How early are you planning to start? Is it going to be something that you start orientation with an invite that if they want to just do this existing videos and they're going to, here's a spot to start? Or how are you planning to roll this out, knowing that, as was mentioned earlier, people are needing small chunks when they need it? What does that look like? And how do you keep that all housed, whether it's an LMS or a web page or something that they can just kind of go to, so that they don't have to have the memory to house it. So maybe I'll add that as a fourth question, is kind of where are you storing all of this?
Yeah, because I think there's certainly kind of different approaches. There's the, you know, what are you doing? And then there's the when are you doing it? And then there's the how of kind of the tech side, or the, you know, where are these videos going, or and what platform are you using? I know we've had some questions around recommendations in terms of particular group meeting apps, which one might be the most appropriate for something like this. So I think that thinking about the when and the what and the how and the is all part and parcel with this conversation. As people are maybe thinking about those new questions, I think the one area we haven't really addressed in the different components of faculty orientation, I think, is the resettlement question. And I know that this often falls outside the purview of educational developers specifically, but certainly I know we have a lot of diversity in terms of our jobs in the room. So just a quick mention of that area, that certainly questions around actually getting people physically to campus in time for the start of the academic year is an issue that many are facing. Questions around quarantine support, and thinking about what kinds of resources might be available to support partners or families. So those accompanying the new faculty members, and how to integrate them into the community a little bit as well. So if you have any thoughts around that as well, that's letter G in our alphabet soup.
Does anybody know if new faculty moving to Canada are classified in that they can cross the border right now from the United States? I know essential workers can, and some others, but I don't know if new faculty joining can.
I know my colleague had mentioned a couple, and it looks like we're getting some yes that faculty can get across, as long as you've got the valid work permit. So, which
might mean the family member, thanks Jennifer, the family members cannot potentially, so unless they also have a work permit as well.
Yeah, and then of course Mark's pointing out immigration is up to the officer's discretion as well, so even with all of the right paperwork, it's not a guarantee.
Which raises some questions. I think one of the things we don't normally do is a lot of support about online teaching when we do the new faculty orientation, but we're certainly, and I'm guessing a lot of you are looking at ways to get the new faculty training online about teaching online when they come, because there is a potential they may have to teach online. Either the whole university goes, or we've certainly had in regular years new faculty who couldn't get across the border because we were right next to the border, and so they needed to teach their courses remotely until the visas and everything were processed. So I imagine this will be a larger part of many of our new faculty outreach.
So one of the things I thought was interesting is that they do want to meet with the grant facilitators right away, and it makes a lot of sense because those are things with really long timelines. I'm wondering also, what are some of the other long timelines that that people have been focusing on in orientation? So maybe it's like figuring out how to navigate the course systems, or other things where a new faculty member, if they don't figure that out within the first term, it actually can really delay them. So one of the things I know is that sometimes new faculty come in and one of the examples I've heard is the idea is that some of our institutions start at 9:10 for courses, and some start at 9 o'clock for courses. And if you're moving from one institution to another, which has a different start time, even something as simple as not getting the start time right can often lead to like a bit of a stumbling at the beginning. So what are some of those pieces that that you've been thinking about, and the challenges in that? And that might just go in to tenure and promotion, or institutional culture, like the time clock one, having been at half my institutions that have a 9:10 start and half of them have a 9 o'clock start. I always have to double check every time I move or every time I'm in a different institution, what start time actually means. So thinking about some of these things about our culture that they won't pick up because they're in our hallways. So what are some of the ones that you've heard from new faculty that was a stumbling block for them that they might need to go? And that could be in any of the categories like teaching and learning, campus services, like maybe they don't realize there's a particular service on campus. What are some of the things that you've been highlighting?
That's a really interesting question, Carolyn. You know, we spent quite a bit of time over the last few years trying to figure out how to engage new faculty with the idea that when they come to a new place, all bets are off. Everything that you think you knew, everything that you did, it might still work, might not. So this sort of cautious, open-minded, but also kind of cautious approach to what's it like here, I think is a really important sort of larger framing question into which the kinds of questions you're asking sort of fit. We have had a couple of faculty members come and talk about things that they discovered after they got here. So after their first semester, they realized X, Y, Z is actually not how this works, as a sort of a, you know, slightly comic but cautionary tales around things that, wow, that's just not how we do things here. And that's been sort of semi-successful, I think. But also we have a session we run with student voices where the students are not visible to the faculty members. The students are in another room. They're just being piped into the room to tell their stories. And the purpose of the stories is always basically, if you saw me in class and you probably thought this was happening, but actually this was what was really happening. And it's really, I'm really lucky that a faculty member came and helped me with that. We've got a bunch of people, we've had over the years, many students tell amazing and some pretty heart-wrenching stories about things that happened. And the idea that you have to kind of be open to that is a really important part of it. We have an early career faculty member who tells a story about how the most important thing that happened in his first year was that his department had insisted he sit on the appeals committee. And that sitting on the appeals committee taught him that all these things that he thought were just people malingering were actually mostly a lot of kids who had real trouble. So that I think that session has been really constructive in terms of just letting people kind of bring a bit more softness to the possibilities of what's happening in their classrooms. Because I think we all there's lots of anxiety for new faculty, right? So, you know, how anxiety can kind of make you kind of harden up in the front. So we have kind of a running conversation about just take a minute and think about what else might be happening.
I just added a new question, challenges and stumbling blocks, because it occurs to me some of these things we're talking about is their challenges we're facing and then possible solutions around them. And so I've added that as number 5. And Lisa just added a point, like one of the stumbling blocks is they're not going to connect with their faculty departments and schools. And is there anything that we're doing as part of our new faculty orientation planning that might help them with that? And so I've just added.
Erika, one of the things that we just talked about with our team is having to be really clear about what needs to be included in syllabi very far in advance, because our student unions have been very thoughtful and very assertive about saying that the syllabus needs to include things like use of webcams, possible online proctoring. So new faculty who are moving between institutions would need to know what are the supported softwares, what are the things they need to have on the syllabus so they can start learning far enough. Having just moved between Ontario and BC, I found it interesting that I had to relearn a whole lot of things around privacy regulation. And there were a lot of things I was used to using in Ontario that I could not use in BC because of stricter privacy regulation. So Google Docs, for example, is off the table in a lot of our courses. Technically, people still use it, but under BC legislation, we shouldn't. And so I myself, as an instructor and an ed developer, I had to relearn a whole lot of software, and that took 2 months.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's such an important piece, is that they show up, and if you're showing up remotely, it's hard to actually pick up the slight differences. It's hard when you show up in person to pick up all the slight differences at institution. But I think if we're relying a lot on exposure and social learning, in other words, that observer social learning, or that they go to their first meeting and they see what that's like, or they overhear conversations in the hallway, all of those opportunities for social learning are not necessarily going to be there with remote. So I think it's so important to try to make those culture shifts more explicit. And you're right, privacy regulations, every province has a different one in Canada. And also every institution also has a different list of, is certain tech allowed, is certain tech not allowed, is online proctoring a possibility, is it not a possibility, what do you need to do for approvals? Even something like exams, some institutions actually don't allow for faculty to change not having a final exam without a written approval from a department head. And so if you've gone in thinking one thing of rules and you find out after you put out your syllabi that you're not allowed to do the final assignment you were expecting, that can actually change things as well. So just knowing, kind of making explicit some of these things that might have been a comment in a one-on-one meeting or something they hear in the hallways. But thank you, Nanda, for that. For the privacy piece.
On Lisa's comment about connecting faculty, Bev, the wise woman that she is, was looking at reaching out to the heads and maybe departmental secretaries with a quick question directly to them. Have you thought about, you have a new person coming, have you thought about reaching out to them? And I don't know how we would word it. I might leave that up to Bev, but just a quick outreach so because so many of the heads are just incredibly overwhelmed right now, they are putting out fires even more so than normal, that they might not even have had the brain time to think about the new people coming in, and a quick email may be all they need.
It is interesting to notice, I think there's been some discussion in the chat a little bit about thinking about how to get new faculty connected, not just within the campus as a whole, but within their own individual department or faculty or school, depending on how the institution is structured. And I think those conversations that, again, maybe that's another challenge a little bit, well, all of this is a challenge, but the option of, running into your colleague in the hallway doesn't happen so much. So maybe there's a bit more developmental work across the campus of supporting departments and faculties as to, how are you going to orient those two new hires that you managed to squeeze in this new context? And here's some ideas or strategies around ways that you might have an online departmental potluck that normally you do face-to-face. So that kind of those giving, I think it maybe becomes even more important to do that outreach to departments, to faculties, to the department heads, to say, this is what we're thinking in terms of the campus-wide faculty orientation. Feel free to draw from these strategies for what you do within your own department.
Just to add to that, one of the Catherine Sutherland documents that I particularly like is that she has a guide for heads about how to talk to your early career faculty. It's a kind of structured process about, do you know about this? It's a little more structured than most heads might use most of the time, but this year it might be worth sending something like that out as a resource, just to think through things you might want to make sure they're aware of. The other thing I've been using, I discovered last year, we had a session at the end of our last orientation around social media and media presence and thinking about who you are in public as a faculty member. And one of the faculty members who was amazing, Bonnie Stewart, her research is actually about the academic identity of people in social media. So she came and talked to them about that. But as part of that, I actually went through and hooked up with as many of the new faculties as I could on social media. And, it's actually a pretty low effort thing to say, you can hook up with these people on social media who are part of your cohort. And you really learn a lot about them and what they're interested in and what their sort of general priorities are from that, in a way that I was quite surprised by, being an old person who actually doesn't use social media. But it's worth thinking about that, whether that's a systematic thing that's worth pursuing with early career faculty and as a cohort thing.
So I'm just going to share this, the screen, this shot of her book. This is Catherine Sutherland's book, where she talks about resources for department heads here. So just so you know, it's in the one that is labeled Early Career Academics in New Zealand, Challenges and Prospects. That one is actually linked on the Google doc, but this is the section in it that is part of it. It's about department heads.
And I just wanted to say, Nanda had her hand up. Nanda, did you want to jump in?
Oh, I commented already, so I'm good. I should take my hand down, sorry.
Sorry. And she did ask a good question about if anyone has examples of fully online. I believe Niagara College may have theirs fully online. I think Natasha mentioned that they have theirs. I don't know if anyone wants to jump in and mention that.
I will also mention that there's been a request sent out to center leaders if they have faculty development resources that are online to be sending them. If you email myself, which is the EDC Vice Chair Communications, but it's EDC_communications at STLHE.ca. And if you send me any of those, we're going to be putting a section on the EDC website for any of the faculty development resources. And ideally, if they can be online, they can be open resources. Just annotate whether they're open for others to use, or you just happen to have them online if people want to contact you, just letting me know, and then we can have kind of a repository of just, so if you're looking to develop something, you can see what examples exist.
I'm looking at our time and I'm noticing we have about 5 minutes left officially. Are there other things? I mean, for me personally, I'll just say that I've found this session to be really inspiring in terms of the kind of collective resources and strategies and, quick thinking that's been demonstrated here. I feel like new faculty are in good hands. But are there other things that we haven't addressed yet? Questions that are still lingering? Resources that you'd like to share?
So this session was advertised on LinkedIn, thanks to AOR, and somebody joined in, I believe from Australia, with some comments recommending a flipped blended approach, sort of not purely one or the other. And he sent a couple links for blogs, and I think he joined something, a session at UBC. So I'll pop those into the Google Doc, and that's a perspective from one of our colleagues in Australia.
Erika or Bev, do you have any closing thoughts or comments that you wanted to share?
No, I'm just really grateful for all the amazing ideas people are putting into this Google Doc, and I'm going to be thrilled to take that away and think about it some more. Thank you, everyone.
And we do have a question.
Okay, you're muted.
Sorry. I wanted to say thank you very much on our behalf, and also to let you know that we have an upcoming workshop next week as part of the Keep Teaching series, which will be May 6th at 1 Eastern Time, hot off the press, just about to go up online. And it's being offered by some of our colleagues from the 3M National Teaching Fellow. And the overall topic is the messiness of the pivot and the lessons learned. So that's going to be advertised and shared, and do feel welcome to pass that on to people who you would find it interesting, and come yourselves, and we'll have additional things that we'll be sharing as we go forward. And do keep sending us resources. Carolyn has been amazing about condensing them and putting them up on the Keep Teaching website. And then all the webinars are being videotaped, and the resources are being posted under the past webinars, so you can go back and pull information from those. So I want to say thank you to everyone for joining, for sharing your resources and your thinking, and to Robin for being willing and suggesting to have this, and to taking the lead on the designing and the facilitating of this event, and to Bev for being willing to come and help show the two sides of the Windsor development. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you very much for everybody who's here, for everyone who's come, and for sharing these ideas. As usually happens at the end, the Google Docs has a bunch of links. I will be pulling some of those in. What I'm wanting to know is, should I be putting the faculty orientation stuff, I'll put some of it onto the institutional level resources on Keep Teaching, but there'll also be a section going up in the EDC website for just faculty development resources generally. So we'll kind of probably cross post some of those resources. But if you have any suggestions, send that email, or you can also just put it in the Google Doc and I will pull it from there as well. Any final thoughts, comments, questions?
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.